This happened a few weeks ago. I returned to my childhood home to take care of my dad. He wasn't well, and I felt nervous about coming back. I hadn't been there in years. When I arrived, I remembered everything, like the peeling wallpaper and creaky floors. It was strange and unsettling. On my first night back, I settled into my old bedroom. I was tired, but I couldn't sleep. I heard a faint sound, almost like children playing outside. I looked out the window, but the yard was empty. My heart raced. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just my mind playing tricks. Memories can be strange like that. The next few days felt odd. I found a toy in my room. It was a small action figure I hadn't seen in years. It gave me chills. I picked it up and wondered who had left it there. I placed it on the shelf, but that feeling of it not belonging there stuck with me. I thought maybe one of my siblings had come back, but I couldn't remember. Then there was the attic. Every time I walked past the door, a cold breeze hit me. It felt unnatural, almost like it was calling me. I hesitated. I wanted to see what was up there, but fear held me back. I thought about it each time I walked by. On the third night, I heard whispers. It sounded like soft voices from the basement. I stood still at the top of the stairs, my heart pounding. I didn't know what to do. The whispers called my name. Maya. The sound made me feel cold, like icy fingers were wrapping around my heart. I felt trapped, watching the basement door. I could go back to my room, but I could feel eyes on me. Finally, I took a deep breath and walked down the stairs. Each step creaked beneath my feet. I was scared, but I had to know what was happening. As I reached the bottom, I could hear the whispers more clearly. Maya. My stomach sank. I wanted to call out, but I couldn't. I turned to see who had spoken my name, but there was no one there. Just darkness. I felt dizzy and nauseous. I wanted to run, but something kept me there. I started to notice shadows moving in the corners of my vision. It felt wrong. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't find my voice. I took a step back, trying to escape that feeling of being watched. I stumbled into the hallway, ready to flee, but then I heard it again, closer this time. Maya. My name echoed in my ears, making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I could hardly breathe. I wanted to understand what was happening. My body trembled. I glanced back toward the basement door. I never found out what was waiting for me down there, only that it wanted me to know it was there. Now I'm back in my room, the door locked tight. I still hear the whispers at night. I don't sleep much anymore. I just want to be left alone. But I know, in that old house, something is still waiting for me. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest. I couldn't shake the whispers from the night before. I needed to know what was happening, but I also felt a powerful urge to ignore everything. I decided to talk to my dad. Maybe he would know something. After breakfast, I sat at the table across from him. He looked weary, a shadow of the strong man I remembered. I pushed my unease aside and asked, "Did you hear anything strange last night? Whispers or voices?" He looked up at me, his brow furrowed. "Whispers," he echoed. "No, I didn't hear anything. Why?" I felt a rush of disappointment. "Just thought I heard something from the basement," I said, forcing a laugh. "Must be my imagination." He nodded, not pressing further. After breakfast, I couldn't focus on much else. Whatever had been in the basement was still in my mind. I sat on the couch, trying to distract myself with TV, but the whispers wouldn't leave. I had to confront them. Later that afternoon, I gathered my courage and made my way to the basement door. I placed my hand on the cold knob and hesitated. The air felt thick, laden with an unspoken tension. I took a deep breath and turned the knob. The door creaked open, and I winced at the sound. As I walked down the stairs, the cold air wrapped around me. I reached the bottom and stopped, letting my eyes adjust to the dim light. The basement was cluttered, filled with old furniture and boxes covered in dust. A chill ran down my spine, but I pressed on. I moved deeper inside, listening for any sign of those whispers. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. a flicker of movement behind a stack of boxes. My heart raced as I turned to face it. I took a few cautious steps forward, but my stomach twisted with fear. That's when I saw it. A small dusty doll resting on top of a box, one I recognized from my childhood. It had been mine, a cherished possession I'd lost years ago. I picked it up, and a wave of nostalgia crashed over me. But then, I realized something was off. Its eyes seemed too bright, almost alive. Then I heard it again. Maya. The voice was soft, almost playful, but carried an undertone of urgency. I dropped the doll and stepped back, panic flooding me. I needed to leave. The basement felt suffocating now. "Get out!" a voice inside my head screamed. I turned to flee, but just as I reached the stairs, I heard a loud crash from behind me. I froze, every muscle tensed in fear. Then I felt it, a rush of cold air followed by a whisper so close it chilled me to the bone. "Maya!" I bolted, racing up the stairs and slamming the door shut behind me. I pressed my back against it, heart hammering in my chest. What had I just uncovered? As I stood there, breathless, I realized that I had stumbled into something far deeper than I could understand. I didn't just find a doll. I'd awakened something from my past. There was no escaping it now. But there was a new question. If I hadn't been alone in the basement, then who, or what, had been there with me? I took a few shaky steps away from the basement door, my heart still racing. What had just happened? I needed to clear my head. I walked into the living room and sank into the couch, trying to focus on anything other than the overwhelming feeling that something was not right. But the unease clung to me like a shadow. I flicked on the TV hoping distraction would calm my mind. The bright images danced across the screen, but I couldn't absorb any of it. Every noise felt amplified. A creak of the floor, the hum of the air conditioning. Each sound reminded me of the whispers that called to me. It was then that I noticed a flicker of movement outside the window. I turned my head quickly, and the sight of a figure passing by sent a jolt of fear through me. I jerked up from the couch and peered outside. My heart sank when I saw nothing, just the empty street. I shook my head, trying to dismiss it as a trick of the light. But as I returned to my seat, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Glancing over to our family photos on the wall, I felt an unsettling urge to look at the one from my 5th birthday. The day I got that doll, I stood up and walked over to it. My smiles in the picture seemed too bright, almost forced. It felt like the spirit of that day had been twisted into something dark. I wanted to shake off the discomfort, to convince myself it was all in my head. But something gnawed at me, a nagging dread that made me want to find my dad again. I searched the house, calling out for him. "Dad? Are you home?" No answer. The silence felt heavy as I checked the backyard and then the garage. He wasn't anywhere. Then I remembered. My dad often went for long walks when he needed to think, usually taking the same route through the neighborhood. A wave of worry washed over me. What if something had happened? As I grabbed my jacket to head outside, I paused, suddenly remembering the doll. What if it wasn't just a forgotten toy? My mind raced with what I had encountered. I felt a chill run through me. I decided to go back to the basement. I knew it was reckless, but I needed to understand what was happening. There had to be answers there. I walked down the hallway slowly, each step feeling like it came with a warning. Standing in front of the basement door again, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the knob. A part of me screamed to turn back. But light flickered from within, illuminating the edges of the door. Was it just my imagination, or could I actually see shadows moving inside? Taking a deep breath, I turned the knob and opened the door. The cold air washed over me once more, carrying an echo that wasn't just in my head. "Maya," it whispered, but this time it sounded almost urgent, as if pleading for my attention. I stepped inside, the shadows dancing at the edges of my vision, and saw something I hadn't before. The doll was back on the box, but now it faced me, its eyes glowing eerily in the faint light. Fear propelled me forward. I had to know what was happening. That's when I noticed the floor, A circle of dust surrounded the box, as if something had been standing there. My heart dropped. What had been drawn into my past was now seeking me out. Then I heard it again, louder this time, reverberating inside me, making my head spin. Maya. Something was in the basement with me, and I understood in that moment. I wasn't prepared for what I would find. I froze at the sound of my name echoing in the shadows. Maya. It was unmistakably calling me, but it felt wrong, twisted. The air thickened around me, and I could barely breathe. My instincts told me to get out, but curiosity fueled my movement. I took a cautious step forward. The doll's eyes shone with an unnatural light. I felt an inexplicable connection to it, like it was drawing me in. I didn't want to touch it, but my hand moved of its own accord, trembling as I reached out. Just before I made contact, the whisper came again, more desperate this time. Maya, help me. I jerked my hand back, a shiver running down my spine. Help? What did it mean? I glanced around the basement, searching for answers, but the only thing that gripped my attention was the doll and the dust circle surrounding it. Had I really imagined the whispers, or were they part of whatever presence lingered here? As I examined the room, I caught sight of something on the wall. At first I thought it was a shadow, but as I edged closer, my stomach dropped. A series of faint handprints smudged the wall, stretching from the floor to the ceiling. They looked too small to belong to an adult. I felt sick. Maya, it whispered again, more insistent this time. I'm not here to help you, I stammered, bringing my hands to my ears. My heart thudded in my chest, a drum echoing the panic rising within me. Go away! But the whispers persisted, blending into a chorus that made my skin crawl. The sounds morphed into my father's voice, calling for me, mingling with the doll's pleading tone. I stumbled back, struggling to make sense of what I was hearing. What was happening to me? Suddenly, the box where the doll sat jerked forward, as if something had pushed it. My breath quickened. Was it the doll? Or was something else trying to break free? I turned to run, but the basement door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. Panic surged through me. I was trapped. My fingers fumbled at the knob, but it wouldn't budge. I pounded against the door, calling for help. Dad! Help! My voice sounded small and powerless in the oppressive darkness. Then, amidst my cries, I heard the sound of footsteps above me. Relief flooded my veins. Maybe my dad had returned in time. Dad! I shouted again, hoping he could hear me. But the footsteps didn't descend into the basement. They faded instead, like they were moving away. Just as despair began to grip my throat, I looked back toward the doll. It was no longer still. Instead, it seemed to twitch, a life of its own swirling within. I felt the temperature drop, and a shadow materialized behind me in the darkness. I whipped around, and that's when I saw it. A figure lurking, its features indistinguishable but clearly human. I stumbled back, pressing against the door. My heart felt ready to burst. This was too much. I had to get out, but the entity between me and freedom held me captive with an icy gaze. Then, everything went dark. I gasped as the darkness enveloped me, my breath hitching in my throat. Suddenly, a scream pierced the silence. It took a moment for me to realize it was my own voice, echoing against the close walls of the basement. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the terror to pass. When I opened them again, the shadow was gone. I blinked, letting my eyes adjust to the dim light. The basement felt empty, eerie stillness swallowing the moment. My heart pounded in my chest, and a question nagged at the back of my mind. Had I imagined it? Then I saw it. Movement from the corner of my eye. The doll was no longer on its pedestal. It lay face down on the floor. My stomach tightened. Against every instinct screaming for me to run, I stepped closer, my fingers brushing against the cool concrete. As I reached for the doll, that whisper returned, sending an electric jolt through me. Maya. I hesitated, heart racing. What do you want? I whispered, surprised by my own bravery. There was an eerie pause, and the basement was consumed by silence. Then, out of nowhere, the lights flickered overhead, momentarily illuminating the corners of the space. I saw something I hadn't noticed before, a small door hidden behind a stack of boxes. It was cracked open just enough for curiosity to slip through. I took a step toward it, compelled by a force I couldn't understand. I glanced back at the doll. Its gaze seemed to follow me, judging, pleading. Maybe it's a way out, I muttered to myself, but doubt gnawed at me. As much as I wanted to leave, something in my gut told me this wasn't over. My hand shook as I gripped the edge of the door and pulled it open. The hinges creaked, amplifying the growing tension. It revealed a dusty staircase that spiraled down into complete darkness. I felt a chill race up my spine. It felt wrong, but I was desperate for answers. "Just a quick look," I whispered. My voice felt small against the suffocating dark. I peered into the void, hesitant. An overwhelming sense of foreboding washed over me, pushing me toward the first step. The wood groaned beneath my weight, the air thick with dust and fear. Then I heard it again, the whisper, now a low growl reverberating against the walls of my mind. "Help me, Maya." At that moment I panicked. I turned back to the basement with its familiar shadows. But as I did, the heavy door slammed shut behind me with shocking force. I leaped back, the breath leaving my lungs. I was trapped again, but this time, the weight of the doll's eyes felt heavier. I felt the urge to scream, but I fought it down. Instead, I leaned closer to the hidden door, trying to see down the staircase. It felt like something was waiting for me there, something that wanted to be found. Then a low growl echoed again. This time it was much closer. My heart raced. I had to decide. Forcing my legs to move, I glanced back at the basement door, then down into the swirling darkness below. I didn't have much time. I took a deep breath and forced my foot down onto the first step. The wood creaked under my weight, but I barely felt it. All I could think about was the growing shadow that seemed to stretch even deeper into the staircase. The air was damp, clinging to my skin like a second layer. I gripped the railing, my pulse quickening with each step I took. The whisper returned, louder this time, sounding almost like a plea mixed with pain. "Help me." The voice was unmistakably familiar. It was my own. I froze, confusion swimming in my mind. "Help you?" I whispered, but my voice felt small and insignificant against the darkness. I wished I had the courage to shout, to claim my space as if the echo could somehow protect me. Suddenly, I heard a shuffle from below, a soft sound, like something dragging across the ground. My heart skipped, and I took another shaky step downward, my eyes straining to pierce the gloom. That was when I noticed it, something glinting off to the side, barely visible. My breath caught. I leaned closer, trying to make sense of it. A small, rusted toy truck lay half buried in the dirt. It looked so innocent, yet it felt sinister, as if it had been waiting for me all this time. As I reached for it, a chill swept over me, wrapping around my ankles like icy fingers. "Leave it," I whispered to myself, pulling back as a surge of apprehension washed over me. But the curiosity was too strong. It was as if the truck was calling to me, urging me to uncover lost memories. As I picked it up, I heard another faint groan. This one was deeper, more guttural. I moved back, cradling the truck in my hands like it was a ticking time bomb. My instincts screamed at me to run, but a sense of duty held me in place. What had happened here? What did all of this mean? Then the growl returned, closer than ever. My heart raced, pounding in my ears. I turned to retreat, but something blocked the staircase. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I couldn't see, but I could feel the presence behind me, a sheer sense of wrongness that sent my stomach into knots. I remembered the doll. The weight of its gaze lingered in my mind. This felt connected, like pieces of a puzzle that I had yet to fit together. I glanced back at the staircase, trying to make sense of the shadows creeping toward me. "What do you want?" I shouted, surprised by the strength in my voice. "Why am I here?" The shadows shifted, and in the dim light, I thought I saw something move. Just a flicker of movement, but enough to send panic surging through me. I stumbled back, clutching the truck tighter, when without warning, a hand gripped my ankle. I gasped, jerking away and crashing against the wall. Adrenaline surged through me as I fought to pull my foot free. The whispers turned into a cacophony of voices, filling my head so quickly I couldn't hear myself think. Then everything went dark. In the silence that followed, I felt the grip release, but the weight of the darkness only pressed down harder. I was trapped, suffocated by the unseen presence breathing right next to me, and just as quickly as it came, a quiet voice slipped through the chaos. "Maya, you're not alone." I could barely breathe, and I wondered who, or what, would come next. I stood in the dark, my heartbeat thundering in my ears, trying to push away the panic, the voice, the hand, the shadows. It all felt unreal. But here I was, surrounded by the oppressive gloom. As I clawed my way back to my senses, my fingers tightened around the cold, rusted truck. "Focus," I told myself. I needed to think, but an overwhelming sense of dread clouded my mind. I had to escape. I turned back to the staircase, but the weight of the darkness felt heavier. The space ahead of me felt like it was shifting, pulsing, drawing me into its depths. My instinct screamed at me to turn and run, but something held me in place. That voice. I considered the faint echo of myself pleading for help. Why did it sound so desperate? Was it trying to warn me? I took one careful step toward the staircase, and as I did, the faint glow of something appeared. Squinting through the darkness, I realized it was a flash of light, flickering weakly, as if it were a distant candle. Was it hope, or another deception waiting to ensnare me? Stay or go, I thought, the trembling in my hands making it hard to grip the truck. But curiosity, a force I couldn't ignore, pulled me toward the light. As I approached, the air changed. The oppressive gloom began to lift just slightly. I could see the edges of the staircase more clearly now, and realized it wasn't just the light. I saw faces swirling among the shadows. They flickered in and out, some full of anguish, others looking almost serene. They were pleading with me, their silent screams reaching out like ghostly hands. "Help us," one face whispered, a woman with hollow eyes that seemed to reach deep into my soul. It sent chills racing down my spine. I wanted to scream, wanted to run, but instead, I stood frozen, paralyzed by terror. Then, in my periphery, a rustle stole my attention. I turned quickly, looking for the source. A figure shifted in the dark, emerging from behind the wall. My breath caught. It was a child, a boy, no older than 6, with messy hair and big, sad eyes that mirrored my own. "Come with me, Maya," he said softly, his voice echoing the tones of my past. "You need to remember." Something deep within me tugged. I wanted to trust him, to listen, but instinct held me back. "What do you mean? Remember what?" His expression changed, shifting from innocent to somber. "You shouldn't be here. They're coming." A realization struck hard. This was no ordinary boy. I felt it in my bones. "Who? Who's coming?" I managed, but fear clawed at my throat, scrambling my thoughts. Just then, the light flickered again and shadows shifted closer. The whispers grew louder, drowning me in sound. Fragments of voices blurred together. "You're in danger. Help us." I felt their urgency crackling through me, but the boy's eyes were pleading. "You have to trust me." And that's when I saw it. In the corner of my eye, something emerged, a writhing mass of shadows blotting out the soft glow. It surged toward me, hungry and full of malice. I couldn't think. Fight or flight. My instincts screamed at me. I turned away from the boy, bolting for the staircase, heart racing, desperate to escape the encroaching darkness. But as I ran, I took one last glance back. The boy was gone, lost in the chaos. And all I could hear was his soft, ominous whisper. "Remember me." That's when I knew. The darkness wasn't just a presence, it was personal. And I was about to find out just how terrifying it could be. I darted up the stairs, each step echoing like a war drum in my ears. The flickering light behind me dimmed, pulled into the depth of shadows that chased me. I reached the top, nearly tripping over my own feet, and pressed my back against the cold wall of the hallway. My breath came in ragged gasps, but I couldn't pause to catch it. My surroundings were stark in the glow of the dim, yellowing light bulb above. I felt a chill, as if the very air was alive and watching. I ran to the first door I found and yanked it open, praying it would lead to safety. Instead, I stumbled into a small, cluttered room that smelled of dust and mold. A bed lay in one corner, with a faded pink blanket draped over it. The walls were plastered with torn posters of cartoon characters from decades ago. It felt wrong. It felt haunted. I closed the door quietly, locking it in place. Would it keep the darkness out? I didn't know, but I had to try. My next thought flashed back to the boy. Who was he? And why did he want me to remember? I could almost feel the weight of his lost gaze, the urgency in his voice, but confusion was clouding my mind. Pushing thoughts aside was hard, but I forced myself to look around. There was a window, a filthy pane that separated me from the world outside. I rushed to it, but when I looked down, that first glimpse of freedom faded. Below was a thick fog, swirling like the shadows I had fled. The ground was almost entirely obscured. Then I heard it, the whispers. They seeped through the door and into the room, weaving around me like a creeping vine. Help us. Remember. The words twisted inside my head. I had to silence them. I brought my hands to my ears, squeezing my eyes shut, but it didn't work. The figure of the boy danced in my thoughts, guiding me once again. I opened my eyes, desperation rising. What do you want from me? That's when I noticed a glint beneath the bed. It caught my eye and pulled me closer. I knelt and reached under, fingers brushing against something hard. A rusted tin box. I pulled it out, half expecting to find some treasure or a weapon, but inside was a collection of yellowed letters. They were neatly folded, their edges curling with age. I picked one up, my hands trembling. The ink was faded, but there was a semblance of familiar handwriting. I couldn't ignore the name scrawled across the top. My own. What is this? I whispered. But the answer felt just beyond my reach. The door trembled then, a shuddering knock that sent shockwaves through me. A shadow loomed under the crack. My heart stopped. I hadn't locked the shadows out. Now they wanted in. The boy's face flashed in my mind, his warning echoing. They're coming. Panic surged through me, and I clutched the tin box. I needed answers, but I needed to survive more. With no choice left, I stood, gripping the letters tightly. And as the doorknob rattled violently, I braced myself against the door, feeling the cold seep through. Whatever was coming was about to break through, and I realized one thing. I had to remember. But could I survive long enough to find out what I truly needed to uncover? The door shook again, louder this time, as if something wanted to break through. I pressed my back harder against the wood, feeling its threat pulse against my skin. My mind raced. What was waiting for me on the other side? Help us. Remember. The whispers swirled in my head like a toxic fog. I couldn't let fear control me. I had come this far, and I wasn't about to back down now. With a sudden resolve, I lifted the tin box and opened it. I spread the letters across the small bed. I needed answers, something to keep my mind away from the door. Each letter was stained with age, but the familiar curves of my handwriting were unmistakable. The first letter began with, "Dear Mom." I swallowed hard. At some point, I must have been writing to my mother, but it felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. I skimmed the contents, unable to absorb the full meaning. Each letter was filled with mundane details of my life as a child, school stories, friends, silly jokes. But one letter caught my eye. The ink was smudged, as if I had rushed through writing it. "Something is wrong in our house. I can hear them at night. They call my name." I dropped it as if it had burned me. My heart raced. I hadn't remembered any of this. The feeling that something horrifying lurked behind my childhood memories was now undeniable. Another loud thump at the door jolted me back. I could hear it splintering at the edges. I needed to act fast. I looked around for somewhere to hide, but the room was bare save for the bed. The window was sealed with grime and despair, a barrier to the outside world. My only choice was to stay put and hope the shadows couldn't find me. Then in the corner of my eye, I saw movement beneath the bed. Was it the last flicker of my imagination? I knelt down, heart pounding, and peered under the bed. My breath hitched when I spotted something dark curling against the wall. Something alive. I pulled back quickly. The last couple of letters swirled in my mind, their content blending with ominous whispers. "They're coming for you," they seemed to promise. Suddenly, a scream echoed through the hallway. Not my scream. It belonged to someone else. My hands shook as I instinctively reached for the letters again, searching for clues in my own handwriting. The boy's face flickered back into my thoughts, a desperate plea shining in his eyes. "Help us." It felt increasingly urgent. I was stuck at a crossroads, paralyzed by fear, yet driven by the need to understand. Then, just as the door was about to give way, a brief flash of light burst through the cracks, illuminating the cramped space and illuminating something else. The figure of a small child peering into the room. My breath caught. It was the boy from my visions. "Come help us," he urged. The door creaked, splintering wood falling away. The promise of escape was right in front of me, but I was trapped between the whispers of my past and the reality of my present. The boy gestured toward the staircase. "We don't have much time." That was when I realized I didn't just need to remember. I had to decide who I could trust. I lunged for the boy, instinctively believing he was my way out. My heart thudded in my chest, a frantic rhythm that echoed in the chaos all around me. As I reached him, I couldn't shake the feeling that the door was about to collapse. "Follow me," he urged, urgency in his voice. I scrambled past him, while the door protested loudly behind. We sprinted down the hallway, shadows gathering at the edges of my vision, whispering more insistently than ever. "Help us. Remember," it echoed, filling the air with dread, while I instinctively followed the boy's lead. The front door stood ajar, a blaze of sunlight spilling into the house. But just as we reached it, the shadows surged, coiling around my limbs like a serpent. My breath quickened, panic clenching my heart. The boy hesitated, looking back. "You have to remember." "What do you mean?" I shouted against the chaos. "What do I have to remember?" "I can't explain," he replied, desperation painting his features. "But if you don't—" A loud crashing sound interrupted us, the heavy door behind us finally giving way. The darkness swirled angrily, reaching for us with spectral hands, their whispers filling the air with urgency. "Help us," they chanted, growing louder as they sought to pull me back. I had to decide, and I had to decide quickly. "I'm not going back," I yelled, pulling myself free from the grasp of the shadows. "I choose to escape." "Then trust me," the boy urged. I looked down at him, seeing not just a child, but the essence of my past. I felt a flicker of recognition, moments lost in time, fragmented memories weaving through my thoughts. Glancing back, dread welled as the shadows coalesced into a smothering mass. I could see shapes, figures trapped in eternal pleading. But I didn't have time to unravel their stories, only the urge to free myself and the boy. We bolted through the front door into the sunlight. But as I stepped over the threshold, an intense cold gripped me, pulling me backward. The door slammed shut behind me with a finality that echoed in my bones. The boy darted ahead, guiding me down the porch steps. My heart raced, uncertainty bubbling in the pit of my stomach. Where were we going? What would happen next? All around us, the neighborhood buzzed with the sounds of life. Children laughing, cars passing. It felt surreal, enticing. Yet the unsettling weight of the house lingered behind us. I caught glimpses of shadowy figures in every alley, in the corners of my vision. "Listen," the boy said, his voice shattering my thoughts. "I can't stay long." "Why? Where?" "You have to confront it, Maya. The darkness won't let you go floating forever. You need to remember our past." Something thrummed deep in my chest. A bond. A connection. "What do you mean? What is it you want me to remember?" In answer, his face stretched across a panoply of emotions, fear, sorrow, and something resembling hope. "You know. It's in here." He touched his heart, looking wistfully at the house behind us. Just then I felt a stirring deep within my mind. The doll, the boy, the letters. The pieces needed to fit together. "Wait!" I shouted, desperation lining my voice. "What?" But before I could finish, he took a step back, expression shifting as shadows began to gather around him, creeping toward the embrace of the sunlight. "You have to remember the truth." "No, don't go!" I lunged forward, but he slipped away, merging with the darkness that swirled between us. "What truth?" I screamed, but my voice met only silence. Suddenly that feeling surged back, a heavy realization sinking in. I turned to face the house, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The truth lay within those walls. Whatever awaited me, whatever had reached out, this was only the beginning. As I stood, heart racing, I knew one thing. I could run, I could escape, but it wouldn't end unless I dared to confront the darkness, the memories I had buried. I needed to decipher what lay beneath the layers of my past and the haunting whispers that would never leave me alone, no matter how far I went. So, with trembling knees and newfound resolve, I took a step toward the door leading back inside. Some questions still unanswered, but grounded now in the urgency for truth. And as the house loomed before me, I prepared to face whatever waited inside. Because I finally understood. The real battle wasn't just against the dark, it was against the very shadows within me.